Mike Schmitz releases LifeHQ. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by MacVoices Live, our weekly live panel discussion of what is going on in the Apple space, as well as the larger tech world, and how it is impacting you. Join us live at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, or whatever time that is wherever you are, at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV, and participate in the chat, or catch the edited and segmented versions of the show on the regular MacVoices channels and feeds. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we're going to talk about a project that has been a long time coming, a long time coming. We've maybe hinted at it a couple times with our guest in the past, but now it's here, it's fully formed, and it's ready for your approval. Mike Schmitz is here to talk about LifeHQ. Mike, it's great to see you, and congratulations on finally getting LifeHQ launched.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it. It's been a labor of love for many months.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this on camera and off quite a bit, and so I'm delighted that you were able to actually get it out there and going. And I'm anxious to hear just what its final form has taken, what it offers, and get all the details. So tell us about LifeHQ.
Sure. Well, I guess the place to start is kind of the origin story of it. So I've been doing a practical PKM cohort. Now I've done a couple different versions of it, which was basically walking through a model or a framework I developed called the PKM stack and applying that using tools for thought, but primarily Obsidian. Obsidian is the plain text note-taking app that I absolutely love. And there's kind of this arc when it comes to Obsidian where you download it and you kind of ask questions like, can it do this? And then you figure out that it can because it has this super flexible plugin architecture, and people are developing plugins all the time. So you figure out, I can install these plugins and make it do this. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And you kind of fall down this rabbit trail of trying to make it do everything until it gets where it's too cumbersome to use, it's too complex, and then you feel overwhelmed again, and then you're like back to the beginning. I've been through that cycle several times, and so with the practical PKM cohort, essentially what I try to do is teach people how to apply values-based PKM principles to not just have a bunch of notes and have them connected and hope that serendipitously you get some insights between some things that you've collected, but how do we practically use this stuff to facilitate our day-to-day productivity and creativity workflows? So I was going through that stuff in the last practical PKM cohort, which was in the spring, and I had a couple people ask me, hey, do you have this stuff that we can just like download and use? And I was like, that's an interesting question. Let me see if I can put that together. So I packaged up the workflows and I made that available to people in the cohort, which was in like March or April. I immediately saw, there's no like how-tos, there's no instructions, no one's going to be able to figure this out. This is like, it makes sense to me because I built it, but there's a whole bunch of supporting material that needs to go along with this. So that's what I've been working on basically ever since. I have written over 60,000 words. I've recorded a whole bunch of videos, a whole bunch of screenshots, and tried to build this LifeHQ, which really is all my Obsidian-based workflows, from journaling to task management to contact management, book notes, Bible study, everything. It's what I use to run my entire life, hence the name LifeHQ. I don't actually really love that name, but it just seemed to fit based on like what this thing was. And then there's a blank version which you can just download, and everything's pre-configured. So all the plugins are in there, all the settings are configured. You can just download it and start using it. That blank one, you can kind of build your own, but then there's also the reference vault, which is sort of like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for PKM. When you buy LifeHQ, you get both of them. So that one is the one that like walks you through and explains how to do everything. And then the blank one is where you kind of build it and make it your own, tweak things, get it just the way that you want it.
Okay, to start off with, for the folks who maybe have not seen your interviews before or are not familiar with your work, PKM is?
Yeah, good point. Personal knowledge management.
Okay.
And it's sort of a big topic now, I guess, in the productivity space because of apps like Roam Research. Notion does this a little bit. Craft does this a little bit. Obsidian is the big one. Tana is another one where you can have a note and then have it linked to another note, and that creates this like graph view. And you've probably seen people share images of those graph views if you run in the same online circles as I do, and they have a whole bunch of dots and they look like these big like constellations. And sometimes they'll have different colors and they'll show how everything fits together. But those big graph views, like they look impressive, but I don't think they're actually all that useful. However, with Obsidian, what you can do is you can take this note that I'm looking at. What are all the connections to and from this note? That shows up in what's called a local graph in the corner. So you basically see all of the adjacent notes. And using that, then you can say, oh, well, from this node, I can click on this dot and jump to this related note. And then from there, I see another path forward to another note and then another note. And so you can kind of navigate your notes that way. And when you do that, you discover how this note that you started from is linked indirectly to this note that you are now browsing 4 or 5 levels down. And what that does for a creator is it makes it a lot easier to get the insights that you would use when you create a piece of content. That's kind of how I stumbled into it. I actually didn't think I was creative at one point. I actually said, I guess I'm just not creative because everybody seemed to, that I was following, it seemed like they just got this download from the heavens and they had the thing, and it was fully baked. And I was like, that doesn't work for me. I would like write songs on my guitar and then I would go out to eat and I'd hear a song on the radio and realize I ripped off the chord progression or the melody line. Like, oh man, I guess I just don't have the gene. And then when I read Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, he kind of enabled me to think about myself as creative because he talks about creating just being connecting dots in ways that haven't been connected before. So the dots themselves are not original. It's just the collection of the dots that I have that maybe is unique and then figuring out how those pieces fit together. So that's what I started doing. I started reading more books and that allowed me to create video courses and write blog posts and record podcasts on a fairly consistent basis. At the time, I was with Agent Efficiency and I was doing a podcast a week. I was doing a blog post about every other week, and I was coming out with a new video course every single month. And I didn't even really think about how crazy that cadence was until after the fact and kind of realized what was it that was allowing me to do that consistently, because I did it for a couple of years without getting burnt out. And I realized it was I had a consistent input and I had a consistent output. So that's one of the frameworks I talk about in LifeHQ is this creativity flywheel. But just having all that stuff and just dumping it into a vault, and having all those connections and looking at it from a big high level view, I don't think that's all that useful. But when you think about, okay, how does this thing that I'm thinking about relate to the other bits and pieces that I've collected that actually resonate, that are things that I'm curious about, things that I'm interested in, that's when you can start to see how these mental Lego bricks can fit together.
Boy, there's so much I want to get to here, but I can't let the one comment you go that you just made, and that is the consistent input, the consistent output. That's really intriguing to me, simply because it sounds like that's an interesting way to avoid burnout, because not only are you constantly feeding the fire, but you're also getting rid of the ash. It goes out. You're seeing results from your work, and that concept really appeals to me.
Yeah, so there's this general term for apps like Obsidian, which is tools for thought, and I really like that. Now, I have another kind of mental model for this. I actually teach in the Practical PKM cohort that your mind is like a water wheel. So information comes in, then information ultimately needs to go out, like you were just saying. But the thing that makes that really click is not just the fact that stuff's coming in and that stuff's coming out. You can just indiscriminately have stuff coming in and it will affect what goes out, but it may not be what you want to have go out. So that's actually where another framework from that Practical PKM cohort comes in, which is the PKM stack. And maybe we talked about this already previously, but at the bottom level of the PKM stack is information. That's the stuff that we consume. Above that, we have ideas, and those are determined by the things that we consume, the quantity and the quality of the ideas that we have. Those ideas ultimately translate into actions. So, information, ideas, and then actions, tasks, projects, the things that we do. Now, if all we do is just consume that information without thinking about it, that will affect the ideas and the actions that we engage with, but it's sort of just reactive. I call it the default life. And I don't like that. So at the top of it, I have another layer and I call it philosophy, but really it's your vision and your values. What's important to you? When you start there, then that can act as a filter for everything else. And the thing that like keeps you on the rails is a reflection process where you get outside the day to day, and that's where the personal retreat stuff comes in. I know we've talked about that before, where quarterly I get away and I just think about what happened in the last 90 days and I set my intentions for the next 90 days. And is this in alignment with my vision and my values? So all of that stuff with the personal retreats, the personal mission statement, the core values, I have in my Obsidian vault, my eulogy. So that's basically like what I want people to say about me at the end of my life, my ideal future. All that stuff actually gets pulled in whenever you open up a new personal retreat inside of LifeHQ. You can change the contents of those notes. And I have whole courses in LifeHQ to walk you through identifying your life theme, identifying your core values, and updating all of the documents. But it just then allows you to apply that intentionality all the way down through the PKM stack. So where the rubber hits the road at the information level, now you aren't dealing with FOMO and all these things. Oh, this might be important. I better save this. You are free to completely ignore the stuff that is not resonating with you. And you are looking for the things that are curious, that are resonating inside of you're curious about the things that resonate inside your soul. It acts as a filter. So you feel free to ignore a whole bunch of stuff and you have clarity on these are the things that are really important.
Let's talk about Obsidian for just a second, because that is, if I understand the concepts here, or the whole idea, that's sort of the vehicle that this runs on, and so Obsidian is an extremely powerful program. Sometimes, though, I know we've had this conversation, it's not necessarily easy to deal with or easy to learn. So yep. As part of this, let's just say I'm going to come to you cold and say, everything you just said, Mike, sounds fantastic. How do I go about getting up to speed with Obsidian, or do I not need to know Obsidian? You're going to teach me how to use it with LifeHQ.
Yeah, so I will teach you how to use it. So most people who are going to be coming to LifeHQ, they are probably familiar with Obsidian. And so there is a built-in onboarding which introduces a couple of the key frameworks and then basically points you in a couple different directions. But assuming that you're a complete newbie, I actually have a whole separate video course called Obsidian 101, which is also baked into LifeHQ. So right at the end of the onboarding, it tells you if you're new to Obsidian, go here first. And then that is going to walk you through some basic concepts. It's going to walk through all of the essential settings and what I've pre-configured them to. So you don't have to go in there, but if you want to understand how everything ties together, all of that is there. There's a video for like the markdown formatting that Obsidian uses. There's a video for tagging best practices. And then there are videos for each and every core plugin that Obsidian ships with. Now, when I say plugins, basically there's two types of plugins. There's core plugins and there's community plugins. So the core plugins are the ones that ship with the app, but even those, you can toggle on which pieces of it you want. So I don't use certain plugins like the audio recorder. I'm not attaching audio to my notes in Obsidian, but you can if you want to. So that's why all those videos are there. But then there's the community plugins, and that's where the magic happens. And I don't even know how many, there's thousands of community plugins. So if you just go start browsing the community plugins at this point, it's pretty overwhelming. Some of them have good documentation, some of them don't. So you really, and even if you install it, there's like a whole bunch of settings and you don't really know how to actually put this into practice. So the community plugins with LifeHQ, that's really the big value add, I think, is if you're new to this, you don't have to figure all that stuff out. What you'd get with LifeHQ is a zip file. You unzip that, you go into Obsidian, you open that, all the plugins are installed for you. All of the settings are pre-configured for you. And there's even a whole bunch of CSS snippets that I've written to clean up different parts of the interface that automatically get applied. All that happens behind the scenes when you click one button when you open it. And then you're basically ready to go.
So you're actually, that's something I didn't know about Obsidian, and you're taking advantage of it, that you can tweak the interface via CSS to make it yours, or in this case, LifeHQ's.
Yes. So like, for example, in Obsidian, there's like the file explorer, which is on the left side, and that's like the whole folder structure. So for LifeHQ, what I did was some CSS customizations. I actually have a logo at the top, which is base 64. So this is the LifeHQ vault. It actually has the LifeHQ logo. It's got a whole bunch of the folders, and then at the bottom there's like a horizontal line, and then below that is kind of like some grayed out links to they're actually just notes in Obsidian, but because they in the CSS file I've identified these specific notes, change the appearance of it. You have like the release notes, you have the change log, you have a support link, and those are kind of always visible at the bottom of the file explorer, as opposed to just showing you, these are all the folders and these are all the files. And you can tweak, the way that the text gets rendered, lots of different things. I didn't go super crazy with it because the more tweaking you do, the more likely it is that when there's a new version, something is going to break. But I did try to create a simple first run experience. So for example, all those like 60,000 words with the how-tos and the course materials, those are all inside of folders. And in the actual file explorer, there are only 4 notes that you see when you open. And actually, when you open it, it takes you to the first one. So it opens a specific file at the beginning. It says read me first. And then here's a short video with some of the different workflow stuff. Then you click a button, it automatically takes you to the next note. There's an onboarding checklist that you can check off as you go. So the whole like first run experience maybe is 45 minutes to an hour, but then by the end, you've done the essential steps. And that way I know you're not just jumping in, stumbling onto a random note and being like, what the heck is this?
I think you've hit on something there that I find with so many pieces of software, even the ones that aren't terribly sophisticated, you need a little helping hand to figure out exactly what this is supposed to do and how it's supposed to do it. And if you don't have that, you run the risk of learning the software the wrong way, or maybe just learning a limited piece of it, and then you never get beyond it. And theoretically, worst of all, you never take full advantage of all that it can do. And for something like what you're describing, that's a real, I'm not sure danger is the right word, because that sounds like, something could go way wrong. But to my way of thinking, yeah, it is danger, because I'm investing time and money in this. I want to get everything out of it I can, because it can deliver so many things.
Yeah, it's a little bit different in that Obsidian can become whatever you want it. So I manage all of my tasks and projects inside of Obsidian, and I have these different dashboards set up with like my essential lists and things like that. But there are trade-offs that go with keeping all of those tasks inside of Obsidian. I mean, Obsidian is essentially a plain text note-taking app. So everything exists as markdown files. And that means that you're not going to be able to get location-based reminders if you rely on that. When you get to a certain place, I need to do this, or even date-based reminders, time-based reminders on a mobile device. That's not going to happen with task and project management. Now, that's okay for me because I kind of view the task manager as the brain, and then the list is the things that I am actually going to do. So I've kind of disconnected the task. I don't want the task manager to become a task master, right? But if that's not jiving with the way that you work, and I know that there are some people that's just not going to work, you're not going to use the task management stuff. So I have these different hub notes for the different types of workflows that are in there. So there's one that's for journaling. There's one that's for task and project management. There's one for book notes. There's one for habit tracking. And you can kind of pick and choose the pieces of this that you would want to use for yourself. Now there is the blank vault, which has all of that stuff pre-configured, but even if you have, if you're already using Obsidian, you've already got a vault, you could say, okay, so this journaling stuff, this is the part that I want to add to my system. And then you've got the hub note there, which walks through the workflows, so you can see exactly which pieces you want to bring over. And then there's how-tos, which will show you this. These are all of the settings. These are the links to the plugins that I'm using, so you can just bring this stuff over, drop it into your vault, and then you keep everything else that you have there already, and just kind of supplement or augment your current PKM system.
So do you? I think I already know the answer, but I'll do it anyway. You do not necessarily advocate implementing all of these workflows at once. Do you have one or two that you suggest that people get started with? Or is it just up to them that whatever they feel they need the most help with on an immediate basis?
That's an interesting question. I think I probably would have a specific place that I would point people to first, which would be the journaling stuff, because I think the daily notes feature that's kind of built into Obsidian, that provides a lot of flexibility for journaling. Now, I have several different journaling workflows that are a part of that, and my way of journaling is a little bit different. I use this concept called daily questions. So I'm rating myself on a scale of 1 to 10 based on my intentions, not on the outcomes. And then those scores will roll up into these different dashboards, so I can see over the last 90 days, like, did I do my best to love my wife on a scale from 1 to 10? I can see my scores on a line graph, and then I can see the average at the bottom. And then I look at that when I get to the personal retreat stuff. And I think that's insanely useful. Even if you don't use all of the exact stuff that I do with journaling, the daily notes makes it perfect for that kind of thing. In practice, I'm kind of curious what parts people gravitate to the most. If I had to guess, it would probably be either the journaling or the task and project management. That is the stuff that demos the best, I guess. Like, I actually have a YouTube video on how I built this dashboard with these essential lists. And when I've done the Q&A call and the onboarding call for the people who have bought in LifeHQ, when I get to the task and project management stuff, that's the one that gets the most oohs and ahs. But again, like, it's not going to be for everybody, and I don't really know that there's a single best place. I do my best in the onboarding, though, to kind of introduce you to a couple different things and then sort of choose your own adventure where you want to go from there.
The fact that you mentioned that you have a project management workflow is interesting to me because it almost sounds like LifeHQ overall is a project management tool. So that, I mean, and the project is my life, as opposed to, maybe, the remodeling of the kitchen that needs to get done, or, the finishing of the basement that needs to get done, or maybe just the changing of the oil in the car that needs to get done. So those might, in my mind, those might be sub-projects, but LifeHQ seems to be at a much higher level to tackle all the projects in your life and make sure you keep everything going the way you want it to. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. And I don't think LifeHQ, even as it exists, is the one app that you're going to use for absolutely everything. I mentioned the PKM stack framework earlier, and one of the things that I teach in the Practical PKM cohort, and I've built into LifeHQ as well, is take those different levels of the PKM stack and figure out what are the things that you do that are associated with those different levels. So at the information level, I've got an archive, and I'm not using Obsidian for the archive. I'm using DevonThink for that. And then at the ideas level, part of that is mind mapping. So I'm not doing mind mapping in Obsidian. I'm using MindNote for that. But knowing specifically these are the jobs to be done and which apps I am hiring to do those jobs makes it clear then how information flows into and out of my PKM system, and I get a lot more out of it. At the same time, I'm also not constantly on the lookout for the shiny new object, because I know exactly what pain point these apps that I'm currently using are solving. I may only use 10% of an app. That's okay, as long as it does something specific that's valuable to me and it facilitates the flow of information through all of the different parts of the PKM system, then I'm good with that. Until you articulate that, though, it can feel, I don't know, it feels cloudy, it feels murky, it can also feel fairly heavy. When you don't understand how all the systems work, you just kind of are grasping for something that is going to make it a little bit better. But then when you understand how the process works and how all the pieces tie together, it becomes a lot more clear as to what is the best tool for this job.
Mike is back next time to finish up our conversation about LifeHQ, but a couple notes first. Mike designed LifeHQ as a Mac primary application, so if your primary device is an iPad or iPhone, you're going to want to read the notes he has on his website about using it in that fashion. Second, Mike has generously given us a coupon code that will let you save $20 off of LifeHQ. So if you enter the coupon code MacVoices, all caps, at checkout, you will save $20 off the price. Thanks, Mike. We'll be back next time. As always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.